I know that this question brings up a lot of other things in people's minds, maybe a lot of questions, images, experiences, and memories, maybe some good, maybe some not so good. For some of you, maybe your immediate answer in your mind to the question, is love worth it, is like a big no. um, thinking about love, thinking about whether or not it's worth the cost, might bring up images and memories of people who've let us down, or times when we've hurt others or been hurt ourselves, experiences of loss or pain. Love is a really complicated issue. And as we get to know more about the effects of trauma and life circumstances on us as people, we appreciate more the damage that can be done whenever trust is broken or whenever people who we depend on let us down. Even if we haven't chosen love, even in our primary relationships with things like our parents or siblings, there can be great capacity for hurt and sadness. So sometimes our immediate reaction is to think that love isn't really worth it. I mean, it's not even a new thing. Think back to Romeo and Juliet, written like over 500 years ago. And what happened to Romeo and Juliet in the end of the story? Spoiler alert if you haven't read it or seen it, but they're both dead. So is love worth it? In a lot of cases, maybe not. But yeah, love can be costly. Some of us know that all too well. And maybe you're on that end of the is love worth it spectrum. You're like, not really. It's a bit too dangerous, messy, stressful, or unsafe. And I think if you feel like that, then you've hit on a real key truth of reality of humanity, which is just the fact that things are messed up. Like the world is not perfect, and things are broken, they're messy, and not everything goes the way you would always want it to go. But maybe you're on the total other end of the spectrum when it comes to this question. You might hear the question, is love worth it? And think, oh my word, yes. You might be saying, stop being such a downer, Hannah. Love is great. I love love. Is life even worth loving if we don't have love? Maybe you feel most alive when you've got a significant other to text, or someone to just feel close to. But maybe it's not even romantic love. Like maybe you're like my sister and you just live for your snap streaks, because that just shows how connected you are to the important people in your life. Or you're just really missing your granny right now. This is all like a very legitimate way to feel, especially at the moment. And if COVID pandemic times have taught us anything, it is that there is a reality that we need connection, we need love, we need relationships in our lives. So if you're feeling like, oh, flip, Hannah, like I need love, then you've also hit on something super key, something deep in the reality of what it means to be human. The fact that we need people, we need connection, we're made for relationship. Beauty, relationships, good things, they do exist. There is joy to be found in loving others, in being loved ourselves. And I'm sure most of us are kind of in the middle of these two extremes. We kind of get that love isn't perfect. There's no such thing as perfection, but also that life isn't like pure suffering. We get that we need connection and relationship, but also that things are messy. As much as relationships are key and necessary, essential for our lives, they're never perfect. People mess up. We mess up. And sometimes people close to us can be casualties of that. We can be casualties ourselves. Sometimes I wish that I was able even to maintain perfect love. I wish that I was able to maintain and establish a perfect relationship, but I can't. Because even if the other person acted perfectly 100% of the time, I know that I wouldn't. And yeah, like I would be the problem even if nobody else was. I wish me and my mum got on perfectly 100% of the time, but we don't. Partly because sometimes she's annoying, partly because sometimes I'm annoying, and we're both impatient people and we get annoyed at each other. So I think these kind of things that I'm bringing up about love, they're not just interesting musings. They're not just things that came from my inspiration that Colleen was asking me about in terms of this talk. But I think that actually these feelings that we have when we think about love, they chime with reality, they chime with just the reality of the universe, the world, and what it means to be human. As you might have expected, or as you hopefully know coming along to this event, this is hosted by the Christian Union, and therefore, seeing as they've asked me to speak, you might not be surprised to hear that I'm quite a big fan of Christianity, Jesus, and the Bible. You might be really far from that point. That might not be a thing that's part of your experience, and that is like totally okay. I'm not asking you to agree with every point I make tonight, or even to think like, yes, Hannah, I get you. That's fine. But let's look at these things that we're thinking about, talking about these things that affect all of us as human beings. Let's look at these aspects that we've noticed from the world of love. And I'd invite you to come along with me and let me point out some ways in which I think these indications of or experience or lived reality point to something deeper. And I think, firstly, point to just the picture that the Bible gives us of reality, really. They chime really well with this picture of the world that God lays out for us in the Bible. So you don't need to like agree with the Bible necessarily. You don't need to agree with me that it's God's word. But let's just think through some of these things together, and we'll be, totally up for discussing, no matter what your viewpoint or position on everything is. So firstly, the first thing I would say is that the Bible agrees that the world is beautiful and that relationships are essential. The Bible affirms this like, yes, you feel whenever you think about all the good things in the world, including the good bits of relationships, love, connection with other people. One misconception that people can have about Christianity is that people can sometimes think that it denies that there's anything good outside of like fluty, heavenly, saintly things. You know, surely you need to just like have a monkish life and just think about like hearts and fasting and stuff, and everything else lies outside the realms of Christianity. But that isn't true. Actually, at the very beginning of the Bible, we see that God made things that were really good. Like they smelled good, they tasted good, they felt good, and he thought that they were good. In fact, when he made people, when he had two people settled into a safe, loving, perfect relationship, that is when he looked at everything that he had made and he said that it was very good. That connection that people had with him and with each other, that was like the icing on the cake of the Bible's picture of creation. That is why we feel so needful of this connection with other people, because that is the way the world was made. That is the basis of reality, is this good connection between people. These people at the beginning were in a harmonious state that none of us have ever really experienced. They were naked and unashamed, the Bible said. They were totally open with each other, such as their oneness and harmony that they had no shame or mistrust between each other whatsoever. And this was the kind of good world that the God of Christianity said about building. And within Christianity, this is still our underlying view of the world, that like the physical world is good, good work, good gardens, but beyond that, like good TV is good relationships are good crack is good. These things are all like truly good. So if you feel like, yes, things are good, then yeah, great. Christianity is for you. We think that too. But secondly, the Bible also chimes with this feeling that everything is a bit messed up. So no matter how you feel about relationships or the world in general, whether you're a bit of a cynic, like I can be at sometimes, and you think that like, you know, sometimes there's no hope for goodness really, or you're like full on into positivity, you do have to admit that things are not the way we would like them to be. Not in a pandemic year, definitely. But even outside of that, even in just like the rest of life, things are not perfect and they're not dreamy and they're not the way we'd like them to be. And the Bible also affirms this idea that things are not really as they should be. in the Bible's origin story of all that is messed up, those people who God created to have a perfect and harmonious relationship with him and with each other and with the rest of creation, those people just can't stop grasping after more, grasping after things for themselves. They're selfish. They want to get outside of the healthy boundaries that God has put in place and push to control everything. They mess up and they damage this perfect bond that they had with their creator and with each other. And if we ever feel frustrated that we're feeling out of sync with other people, or like we're annoyed that we never managed to get relationships to go 100% right, then it's basically because these people are our parents. We're descended from them, and we're descended with this tendency to look out for ourselves to the detriment of harmony and oneness and goodness and the way we wish things would be. And we know that messed up nature of the world, it's not just something that's out there, but I know, at least for me, it's in me too. It frustrates me to just think about how I can never make things perfect, and things are never perfect out there. They're never perfect in here. But I find comfort knowing that there's an explanation for this in the Bible. I find it incredibly reassuring that this ancient book knows me better than I know myself, and it offers not just an explanation of this problem or of the way I feel, but hope for a way out of it as well. But before I go down that road, we're going to go back into our breakout rooms, and I have a couple of suggested questions that I'm going to put into the chat. But yeah, this is just like, well, sorry, suddenly unable to click. This is just a kind of a time for you to like process things as I've been waffling away here at a rate of knots in my northern accent. Sorry if I'm like speaking quickly and you can't understand me or anything, anybody. Feel free to tell me actually if you need me to slow down. But this is time for you to process things. Don't get too bogged down in these specific questions. This isn't like a college seminar. I don't need you to like give me answers to these things specifically. These are just suggestions, kind of guide your chats. But yeah, feel free to chat about anything that has brought up for you, any thoughts that you have on this whole issue. And maybe if somebody in each group could sort of like take note of generally what your group is saying and thinking about things, and then whenever you come back, I might ask someone from each group to just put that in the chat and we can like see other people's thoughts. So thoughts on like these questions or anything else that you from your breakout rooms would like to pop chat through thoughts into the chat. You don't have to, but it just might be interesting. And we'll give you a second childbirth. Thanks, Colleen. Good, great. Anyone else have any thoughts? Okay, David Eve's face is strongly reacting to the word childbirth. Okay, Disney says it all. Does it? I don't really know what you mean by Disney says it all. But cool. I don't know. Like
Sean can explain it later.
Okay, grand. What do you mean by Disney says it all, Cian Jenkinson?
That was Disney says it is.
Oh, Disney says it is. Sorry, I just read.
As in Disney says love is worth it. That's kind of what we were chatting about.
Okay.
Sorry for my vagueness.
No, it's okay. Sorry for just like misreading your words. That's clearly I don't know, subconsciously I must think that Disney says it all. But I don't. Cool. Thanks for those insightful thoughts that you put into the chat. I can tell that your conversations have been deep and fulfilling. So I appreciate that, guys. Oh, nominate Jody. Jody, did you have some great deep thoughts?
I went on a complete rant in my group, and now I can't remember what I was saying at all.
Okay.
It was a total rant. So
wonderful.
It was a very good rant, though.
Okay.
Oh, I can try and pull it up if you want me to. What's that saying? Oh man, is love worth it? And I was thinking about how we live in a society that's like really hyper individualistic, and the kind of narrative is like you're your own man, you're your own woman, go and find your own destiny, and we're not necessarily connected as communities much anymore, where we're kind of relying on each other. And love is almost like a kind of a humble stance of like, well, I need these people, kind of to survive, like, and you understand your place in society and as a part of a community, and you out of that kind of a place you love, but in ours, so I was telling them about this guy Patrick McGuinness. He came up with the phrase FOMO, FOMO, fear of missing out. Somebody nod or something. FOMO. And he, okay, thanks. And then he also came up with this other phrase, which is FOBO, which is fear of better options. And when he was in graduate school, he saw all these people who were like holding out on making a decision because they were waiting for better options, like better job options or whatever, and this is kind of a really narcissistic, modern day, hyper individualistic point of view, like where you're just looking out for your own kind of better options, and a lot of your thinking is just around yourself, and you're sort of disconnected from other people, and then I was just saying that, like, when we think about God's way of, or his motivations, it's not like your better options, it's always from a place of love, and that in our society, like, so much of it is rage based, we see so much rage now. And I was saying just the two things that I think are missing, are love and forgiveness. And those are the two things that God poured onto us. He gave us all his love and complete forgiveness. And that if we can follow him, then we can kind of see the motivation of our lives, the trajectory of our lives kind of based out of love, because it is worth it, of course. He gave it to us, and he said, those who are loved much, love much. So that maybe we could just be aware of the fact that our society promotes this kind of, like really hyper individualistic, be your own man, be your own woman, go your own way, get your better options, and just think a little bit more that, actually we're all connected. God loves us and he loves everyone, and that, he would like us to kind of maybe see the trajectory of our lives kind of motivated out of a place of love. There you go.
Wow.
I think that was
great.
it.
Yeah, I can just stand down now. Judy said it all. That was like super helpful though, Judy. Thanks so much. Yeah. Yes, who's doing a sociology master's, guys? Yes. Wonderful. And yeah, also in the chat, there are some other people's thoughts, and they're good. You can look at them and appreciate them. And
also childbirth, I could say something about that as well if you wanted to.
I think we're okay.
If you need any details about that or anything, message me up after.
Yeah, there you go. Judy's your woman if you want some childbirth details. I'm not, and I'm pretty happy about that. So thanks, guys, for all the thoughts. Thank you for having your great discussions in your group. I hope it was interesting and as enlightening as Judy's groups found it. So we've been thinking about these thoughts about love, and all these thoughts about like beauty and mess. But we still have this question, don't we, of is love worth it? So I left you thinking there about this question at the end of what would it take for love to be worth it? And yeah, that was mainly because in my mind, whether or not it is worth loving someone depends very much on who that something or someone is. It's whether it's worth loving someone, whether it's worth committing someone, whether it's a good thing or a safe thing or a healthy thing for us, very much depends on the object of our love. If you want some, like Judy can tell you childbirth stories, and I can tell you some terrible boyfriend stories. So if you want to hear any stories about people who are not worth loving, I can point you in their direction. And I can tell you very little else. I can't tell you how to get a good boyfriend, only how to get a really bad one. But sorry, this is what I did last time I was giving a talk that was vaguely on the theme of love as well, and I got a lot of like relationship advice questions afterwards. So sorry if I've just pointed your mind in that direction. Feel free to ignore my like weepy tales. But if we're going to circle back to this question of if love is worth it or not, and who is worth loving, I would like to hone in on whether or not it is worth loving Jesus. All of these couple of weeks, we're going to be going through like different questions and topics and things that people might sort of think of and wonder when it comes to Christianity. But really, all the things that we're talking about, they come back to, or they center on this person of Jesus. Like Christianity stands or falls in Jesus. If it's worth going after Jesus, if he is true and who is who he says he is, then Christianity is worth it. And if he's not worth following or not worth loving and not worth engaging with, then Christianity is not worth it. We should all just go home. And I'm not going to be apologetic for the fact that I'm kind of bringing it around to Jesus. I'm not trying to be sneaky or anything. Not going to try and surprise you with the fact. It's probably not surprised you that I'm bringing Jesus into the conversation. But yeah, whatever you think about Jesus currently, you're like welcome here, and you're welcome as part of this conversation, and you're welcome to be engaging with everything all over these 2 weeks. Thanks, Jesus smuggling. Not trying to smuggle Jesus. Very clearly, go talk about Jesus. But yeah, I genuinely believe that Jesus is the most worth the effort guy in the universe. And here are 3 reasons why. So reason number 1 is loving Jesus is worth it because he is the source of all goodness and beauty. As we thought about love, and I encourage you guys to think about beauty and goodness in the world. If we acknowledge that beauty is a real thing, that joy and goodness are real things, then we do have to question for ourselves where they come from. I've already talked about the fact that the Bible talks about the beginning and creation being from this God and God creating this perfect world. But the Bible doesn't talk about this springing out of nowhere, and nor does it talk about it springing from like a kind of impersonal, faraway God. But the Bible makes it clear in its depiction of God that God is intrinsically about relationship. We believe in a triune God, we say 3 persons in one, and that like sounds weird, I get it, but it's really at the core of everything that we stand on, because the beauty of that is that we believe that God existed eternally in relationship as Father, Son, and Spirit. We don't actually conceive of God as some angry old man in the sky who is distant and uninterested or unloving, but actually at his heart, God is love and God is loving, and God is this mutual love and care and concern for one another. We see this God eternally loving. And if we want to look at more detail of what Christians mean when we talk about God, we can just simply look at Jesus. God being Father, Son, and Spirit, it doesn't mean that God the Father is the distant, angry God, and Jesus is like the nice bit of God. But actually, if we look at Jesus, we see the whole character of God displayed in a person who walked on the earth. Jesus is the perfect image of God, and someone, thankfully, few people like wrote down what he did and his actions, and we can see that and look at that and figure out what God is like from that really clearly, which is very, very handy. So what is God's character like? What is this Jesus like? Really, Jesus is just very beautiful in his character, in his behavior, in his essence. And you can clearly see why this God would end up making a beautiful world full of joy and goodness. When Jesus was walking on the earth, while the other religious teachers and important people of the day were trying to grasp for power and status for themselves, Jesus was eating with and welcoming in those who had no power and no status and no credibility in the world's eyes. If Jesus was here today, he'd be more concerned with having folks around for dinner who lived in direct provision centres than he would with dealing with people who work in the Dáil. He cared about those who no one else cared about, and he lifted up those who life had trodden down. And you know, in life, you really want to be careful about who you commit to. You need to take care that they're not someone who's really out for their own gain and own benefit and has no real care or concern for you. But from Jesus, we can see that God is fully concerned for other people's welfare and not his own. And he is this perfect example of someone who has a beautiful heart for others and is the ultimate person who it is safe to entrust yourself to. So that's my first reason that Jesus is worth loving, because he's the source of all goodness and beauty. And second reason is that loving Jesus is worth it because he's not content to leave everything messed up, including you. As we've chatted about, the world is pretty messed up. That's the truth. And as we realize that reality, then, as we think about Jesus living in the earth, if Jesus really is this all-powerful God that I've been chatting about, then if he had just left things as they were and left that kind of messed up nature of things without dealing with it at all, then that would be pretty horrible. Like, he would either be a powerless God or a really horrible God. But Jesus isn't just worth loving because he's beautiful, but also because he doesn't leave the things that aren't beautiful in the way that they are. He doesn't leave the mess as it is. Jesus wasn't just this hippie man who's floating about and not like confronting anything with his long flowing hair above the world's problems, but he was there down in the nitty gritty of life and the mess of people's lived realities, and he still is. There was one woman who came across Jesus, who we read about in a book called Mark, and she had a real long-term gynecological problem. I shouldn't have put that word in there. But she had this really serious issue. And because of that, she was rejected, she was sneered at by other people, she was an outcast of society, and people steered clear of her. But when Jesus came into contact with her, he profoundly changed not only her medical diagnosis, not only her physical state, but he also called her daughter and brought her in and restored her broken self-image and image in the view of other people. And when he came across a man possessed by a demon, we see another story in the same book. This man was living a life full of self-harm and had serious social issues, serious things going on with him. Jesus didn't just leave him as he was, but when Jesus was finished with him, this man was cleaned up and in his right mind, and able to go on with a normal life. So Jesus didn't just leave the messed up world the way he found it, but whenever he encountered things that were not okay, he fixed them and he made them better. And what's really encouraging to me is that Jesus didn't just fix the things kind of out there that were obviously bad, but he also dealt with his inner circle, with his disciples who he was working and living with. Whenever he came across messed up attitudes in their way of thinking about the world or thinking about themselves, he confronted those things head on as well. Whenever he knew that they were bickering among themselves about who was greatest and they were trying to grasp at power and status, he put a little child in front of them and he told everybody that true greatness wasn't found in trying to get ahead of everyone else and pushing other people down and trying to get on top of them, but it was found in service and kindness and in loving other people. He pointed to this child and he said that the key was serving others, even serving this little child, someone who could do nothing for them in the world's eyes. But yeah, they were to love everybody. And I'm really glad that Jesus didn't leave his disciples where they were with their messed up attitudes and their broken perspectives, because it means that he won't leave me with mine either. It bothers me that I have such a messed up, selfish attitude to the world a lot of the time. And I don't know if it bothers you if you look inside yourself and see something similar. But I hope it does. I hope you're not content with that. Despite our best intentions, we keep on hurting ourselves and we keep on hurting others. And it's just a realistic and humble thing to do, to look at ourselves and to see that and to admit that that's the way we are. But if you are unsatisfied like me with the way you are, then there's good news because there's a solution to this, and his name is Jesus. And just like he did with his disciples 2,000 years ago, Jesus very kindly does not leave us in our messed up state. But the Bible says that when we come to him, he enters our lives, and it goes so far as to say that we're united with him, we're united to him, and he transforms us from the inside out, from the heart first. So if you chat to any people here who call themselves Christians, they'll be the first to tell you that they are imperfect, and we all are. None of us are pretending to be perfect ourselves. But they'll also be able to tell you, I hope, of ways in which Jesus has changed them and has made them more like himself, which is one reason why loving him is worth it. And my third reason, so loving Jesus is worth it because he's beautiful and he's the source of beauty, and he's also not content to just leave messed up things the way they are. But my third reason why loving Jesus is worth it is because he loved you first. Sorry, I've now transferred to physical notes, and that's why there's this page flopping around. False, guys. So Jesus loved you first, as I say. I don't know if you've ever been like on the cusp of maybe a relationship, going out with somebody, or maybe you're just like friends with somebody, but you like really like them and you really want to be their friend, but you don't know if they like want to be friends with you as much as you want to be friends with them. In any of those kind of awkward situations where you're not really sure what the other person's thinking or feeling, you know, you want to kind of have a safety net. You want to kind of know that that person is as into this thing as you are before you commit yourself or go for it. And with Jesus, we don't have to wonder about his commitment level to us before we come and commit ourselves to him. Jesus has already shown himself to be 100% committed to us. He doesn't leave us in limbo or leave us second guessing what he feels about us. But Jesus has fully confronted, as I've already said, the fact that we're messed up by coming and living a perfect life and dying on the cross. Like with Adam and Eve, those first people who I was talking about, and their shame that they had, we all likewise have shame. We all likewise have shame just from the very same thing of going our own way and of having this relationship that we would love to have with God, broken and imperfect. But Jesus came and he took our shame on himself and he gave us his honor and perfection and goodness. He came and he displayed his absolute commitment to us and his 100% sold out devotion to just allowing us to be one with him, to have this relationship with him and with God the Father restored, which is a really amazing, miraculous and wonderful thing. If you've had any contact with Christianity at all, you'll know like the image of Jesus on the cross, and that is what that whole image stands for. It stands for Jesus' commitment to you. It stands for Jesus going out there first on a limb, taking the punishment that was needed to be taken so that you could come to God. And Jesus did that for you, fully committed himself to the point of death so that you could come to him with no reservations. When I was talking there about the fact that Jesus helps us in our messed up state, when I was talking about Jesus helping us in our messed up state, I hope you didn't mishear me and think that Jesus needs you to sort out your messed up state before you can come to him, because that is not what the Bible says or not what Christians believe at all. In fact, Jesus loves us to come to him in our messed up state, exactly as we are. Like, that's still my life and my reality every day is me coming to Jesus and either acknowledging that I've messed up again, or I don't know, just like really sometimes fed up with how I like can't get my act together in certain ways and all that there sort of thing. But that's okay. Like, Jesus isn't sitting there waiting for us to get our act together before he'll move towards us. He's already done all the moving towards us that was necessary, and all we have to do is just come and accept him and accept that, and enter into that relationship that he's offering for us to have with him. Which is just an incredible reality. But maybe you're sitting there listening to this and think, that that's not very credible, or a lot of the things I'm saying are kind of like going over your head, or you have a lot of objections or a lot of things that are kind of in between you and you thinking like, cool, yes, I could believe this. That is totally okay. No worries. I'm not expecting you to turn around and be like, cool, Hannah, I believe you now. I'm all in for this. If you do think this is great and you're all in, then like let us know. Wonderful, because it is a thing that is so worth being all in for. But if you're not there yet, that is totally fine. If you think you're never going to be there, that's totally fine as well. If you're 100% skeptical and have so many questions, then that is what this week and all these events and essentially the Christian Union all the rest of the year as well, that is what they exist for. It's for you to discuss those things and enter into those questions and deal with those things and juggle with those questions with other people. So don't feel like you need to just be like yes or no, yay or nay at this point in time. But I think hopefully you'll agree that it's worth looking into. Like, if there's even a smidgen of a chance that this is true, if there's even a smidgen of a chance that Jesus is like genuinely the source of all goodness and beauty, if he is the solution to your kind of messed up feeling and state, and if it's true that he loves you unconditionally and has gone to the cross to die for you, then I'd say anyway that is like too good to just pass over and ignore. So even if there's a smidgen of a chance in your mind that that could be true, I would just encourage you to keep on looking and searching and digging into things. Come back to other events over this week and next week. Ask your questions, wrestle with things, but also I would say look more into this person of Jesus. As I said, everything kind of hinges on him. And all of the kind of stories I referred to and things about Jesus that I referred to tonight, they're all found in one of the books of the Bible called Mark, which is, it's named after the guy who wrote it, essentially. It's this guy called Mark, and he just went around and asked lots of people around the time of Jesus what was happening with Jesus. And he wrote it all down, and he got lots of like eyewitness testimonies off people and wrote down what was happening. So we have these books in the Christian Union. It's called Uncover, See for Yourself. And yeah, it's just the book of Mark from the Bible, but presented in a nice way. It's a nice little book. And also has really handy questions at the back that you can go through, and you can kind of like think things through a bit more. They make things a bit clearer. They get you into the Bible, especially if you've like never really looked at the Bible before or never really read it for yourself. They're just super helpful for like getting you into the different things and helping you figure out what it's saying. So if you would want one of these, they're going to be available free of charge. There's going to be a feedback form that Colleen's going to put up in a while. And we're all going to fill it out no matter who you are, and just like give any thoughts that you have, good or bad, on the talk, or any questions that you have. But you can ask for one of these for free. Just give us your address, and if you're in Cork, we'll drop it round, and if you're not in Cork, we'll post it to you. But there's also going to be a group that's going to be meeting after these 2 weeks are over, so sometime after the 8th of March, there's going to be a group that's meeting regularly, and they're going to do a kind of book club and read through this book together. So you can get a copy and you could read it along with someone from the Christian Union or the person who invited you here, or we can find you someone to read it with if you came off your own bat. And yeah, you can do that with someone individually, or you can come along to the group and engage with it that way as well. But I would really encourage you to just keep on exploring and learning more. And the worst that could happen is that you're better informed, you know. Great. So thank you, Colleen. I'll hand back to you. Oh no, actually, would you want me to say? Oh right, okay. You're going to go back into breakout rooms. Sorry, there you go. Per communication / remembering what we're doing on my part.
We're just talking about in our group about the Old Testament and the New Testament, and just like the love that's displayed by God in both the Old and the New Testament and how they connect. That's my question.
Cool. So hold on.
How do they connect? Like it seems a lot more loving in the New Testament than the Old, and yeah, is it seems like two different gods almost? And how is that the same God? Same love.
Cool. Gareth, do you fancy answering that question?
I'll say a couple of things just to start us off, and then we'll see where we get to. It's a really good question, and it's not an uncommon one. I think sometimes there is this general idea that on the one hand, the God of the Old Testament is quite tyrannical. He's certainly very rule-based. He's a bit disconnected and a bit harsh. And then you have sort of Jesus in the New Testament, who's gentle, meek, and mild. And everybody loves him and would never say anything that offends you. I actually think that if we really look at these texts beyond the kind of just ideas and stereotypes and things that kind of exist out there, I think if we really engage with the text seriously, I think we're going to find it hard to come up with that kind of dichotomy. For example, the Bible in the Old Testament, God is described continually as a God who's slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. He's a God who engages relationally with people. So one of the Old Testament characters, kind of chief figure in Judaism and Christianity, but also Islam itself, is the figure of Abraham. And Abraham in the Old Testament is kind of this paradigm of what it looks like to have a relationship with God, and also then come to a relationship of trust in God. And it's really interesting if you just follow that story to see how patient, how open. I mean, at the end of the day, one of the greatest and most loving things that God has done is to make himself known. You know, the most loving thing that a person can do is to let you get to know them. And you'll only get to know them, you'll only discover whether they're trustworthy if they actually sort of open themselves up and begin to reveal who they are and allow you to have conversations and ask questions. And we see that all the time. Obviously, it's most tangible in the person of Jesus, but that's not to say that God decided that his approach wasn't working out in the Old Testament. So we got some PR guys together and decided, guys, this harsh, distant stuff isn't working out, so let's come up with a better strategy. That's not what happened at all. We see God interacting all the time as a God who wants to reveal himself, as a God who wants to communicate, as a God who made the universe the way it was because it would speak to human beings who can study the universe, of his design and his beauty and his creativity. And even when it comes to things like justice and judgment and things like that, one of my favorite and the most complex figures in the Old Testament is a prophet known as Jonah, who falls out with a whole bunch of people called the Ninevites. And God sends him basically to go and bring a message of judgment to the Ninevites. But if they will turn away, if they'll repent, to use a kind of theological word, then God will relent from doing that. And of course, Jonah doesn't want to do that because he knows that the God of the Old Testament will be gracious if people take this message seriously and actually look at the way they're living. So Jonah is an Old Testament prophet who gets annoyed at the Old Testament God because he's not wrathful enough, because he doesn't just wipe people out in a heartbeat because, like the gods of Olympus, he just feels like it and he likes to play with human relationships. The God of the Old Testament is categorically different. And yet at the same time, Jesus as well talks a lot about things like justice, and even God's justice towards people who don't want him. Jesus says some serious things. In fact, one of the things he's strongest about is religious hypocrisy. People who put on a pretense of religion, but actually aren't really interested in a serious a mutual relationship with God. And then, you get to the last books of the Bible, or the book of Revelation talks loads about the importance of justice. So I think rather than set up the God of the Old Testament as a God of judgment, the God of the New Testament is a God of love. I think when we really move away from kind of just the soundbite stereotype and take the text of the Bible seriously, one of the things we'll see is that the God of the Bible is consistent the whole way through. It's the same person, but he is a God who takes justice seriously. And we all should take justice seriously, because no one wants to live in a world in which justice is just an idea to put on a placard or to post on social media. People are passionate about justice because it's real and it matters. But if that's just, social contract, or if that's just my idea of justice and it only matters how I live, and that's a subjective thing, then it makes a nonsense of the whole thing. But if there's a standard of justice beyond my own preference, beyond what my society says, that's actually objective, then justice is real and justice can be pursued. But here's the thing. Justice without love is devastating and crushing. But love without justice is just sentimental emptiness. We need both. And true love only exists in the presence of justice, not in the absence of it. The reason why my wife's love for me is so meaningful is because I know it's based on her judgment, that she has weighed up the evidence, knows all about me, and yet still chose to love me. So love and justice are actually two sides of the same coin. And the minute you take them apart, the whole thing collapses. And I think when we look carefully at the God of the Bible, Old Testament and New, and again, that's not to say that God doesn't deal with people slightly differently in the Old Testament than he does in the New, but that's different from God being a different character. I think when we look at those two things, we're going to see that actually God is the kind of God that we would want to be God, because he takes justice seriously, and our yearnings, that our suffering and our brokenness and the trauma that we've experienced is taken absolutely seriously. But at the same time, he also is prepared to give love and grace to us who've caused others to suffer, who've rejected him, who's caused trauma to other people. So I think it's consistent. That's actually a much longer answer than I expected it to be. But yeah, Hannah, if you've any more, go for it.
It's all right. I mean, this is very helpful. So don't apologize for its length at all. Yeah, I think like the only minor thing I would add, like the more you get to know the Bible, like as Gareth was saying, like it's easy to think that if you think about it in soundbite kind of terms. But the more you get into it, the more you see that it is like a concrete, cohesive whole. And the God who's described as a concrete, cohesive whole. And even in the New Testament, like Paul spends a lot of time trying to show people like this is where it's all been pointing, like everything before has been pointing towards Jesus. And yeah, things like explaining to the Jews, like, yes, now all of these people who aren't Jews can come to God and know God. That's not a surprise. You shouldn't have been surprised. Like this whole time God has been wanting to bring the whole world to himself and not just the Jews. So yeah, it is incredibly internally consistent. And the more you look into it, the more you see that. If you kind of look at it at surface level, I could get why you might think it's not.
Yeah. I think it kind of comes back to this idea of like, on what basis do we actually like make evaluations about people? I can remember like one of my earliest days at university, there was a guy who used to sort of always come in late to our class, and just like I didn't know him, but like he I just remember him as this guy who always like came in late, and I made these really snap judgments based on this really limited window of evidence about him, and I just thought, yeah, this guy's a bit of a waster. Come on, like you can at least turn up to class on time. Sorry if you don't turn up to class on time. I guess no one's turned up to class at all these days anyway. But at the same time, right, there came opportunities throughout my university where I got to know him better. And the more that I investigated him, rather than just my perception of him or just what people told me about him, which was based on really limited evidence, the more my evaluation of him began to totally change. And actually, the guy's my best friend now. Like, I conducted the wedding of him and his wife. He was the best man at my wedding. So it's really this question of when we come to the God of the Bible and our evaluation of him, are we prepared to take a serious look at what he is like and then make a judgment? And if you've looked at the evidence and you decide he's a tyrant, that's okay. I can respect that. But if you're just going to make a snap judgment based on a meme or based on, something that you've seen on a tweet by an atheist or something, and you just take that and you don't investigate the evidence for yourself, that's with the greatest respect in the world, that is slightly harder to respect because you're just doing what I did and I was totally wrong. And the thing is, you might be too when it comes to God.
Yeah, great. So don't base your theology on memes and you'll have Gareth's respect. Thanks, Gareth. The next question coming up, well, yes, the first one in the chat there is, why does God love us first? From Cian and his crew. And he also wants me to say gynecological. There you go. I think that was better. But why does God love us first? I think, yeah, I can say some things and then you can chip in anything that you want to chip in, Gareth, sure. But I think, yeah, I suppose one thing I would say to this question of why God loves us first is that it is in God's very nature to love, as much as it is in God's nature to be just, as Gareth was talking about with like the Old Testament and the entirety of the Bible. It is also entirely his nature to be loving. And in fact, the Bible says that God is love. God is in entirety, like all of these characteristics that he is. It's not like he's sometimes loving and sometimes not loving, but God is love. And therefore, yeah, it stands to reason that God would love us first, and that God would love us primarily, and that God would love us to far greater extent than we would be able to love him. But also I think like we're not able to love God first. Like that's, I don't know, like, yeah, people trying to approach God without God wanting to approach them or without wanting to stoop down to them wouldn't work. And I think that is what a lot of maybe religious practice or a lot of what our minds might be full of in relation to God. A lot of that is us thinking that we have to like earn our way to God. We have to like love our way to him. And if we just like love him enough, if we just like give him enough of ourselves, then maybe at some point we'll like sort of tip the scales in our favor or something, and he'll like reward us with his love in return. But actually, like, we can't do that. There's no other way that we can overcome our imperfection by just like loving God as much as we possibly can. And if we could, that would just be a really confusing, annoying and sad way to exist, because how would we ever know if we'd loved God enough? How would we ever know if we'd earned enough of his favor? That would just leave us like sort of thawing and hoping and never really knowing where we stood with God. But thankfully he doesn't leave us like that. He loves us first. He engages with us first. As Gareth said, he makes himself known. He makes it known to us that he does love us, that he wants this relationship with us, and he makes that possible through Jesus. And he leaves it up to us whether we want to accept that or not and come to him or not. He's not going to force us into that relationship. But yeah, he initiates it, because I don't think we ever could like do enough to initiate that from us or end. Any thoughts, Gareth?
Just one. I think it just goes back to this idea of not just why does God love us first, but why does he love us at all? And I think like one of the, as much as we like, it's inherently human to need to feel loved. It's uniquely human, like the need for love. But I think one of the hardest places to be is in a loving relationship when you're not secure. I think that's one of the tensions of in a loving relationship, when you're not quite sure that you deserve that love, when you're not quite sure that that love's going to be permanent, when you live every day with this fear that that love's going to be taken away. And so, like, as much as we all need love, I think one of the hardest places to be is to have love that you're never quite sure is secure. And I think that's because a lot of us sort of live with understandings of love as like a kind of merit system, that you have to be loving in order to get love. And so we try to make ourselves more loving, and either to get love at the beginning or to maintain it once we've got it. And I think that's what's radically different about the Christian message, is that actually God's love is not conditional on our performance. It's actually given to us before we could perform, and it's given to us even when our performance is particularly bad as well. Most religions and even just atheistic ideas of love are just like, as long as you maintain, it's quite contractual, as long as you maintain your end of the bargain to look a certain way, to be interesting enough, to fulfill the other person's desires, whatever they might be, then you get love. But the minute you don't, then the love goes insecure. What's so radical about the love of God is that he did love first. As I said, before there was anything loving, and even when there was lots to not love, he still gives us that relationship. I think it was Victor Hugo in Les Miserables. So any musical fans here? In the book of Les Mis, he writes this. He says, "The greatest happiness in all the world is to be loved for who you are. Greater still, actually, loved in spite of who you are." And I think we're all looking for that kind of love that's properly secure, love that will not let us go, love that will not walk out. And I think because God offers us his love before we could do anything, then it exists in a sense beyond our performance, and it won't go away if our performance goes away. And I think that's it doesn't necessarily answer the question why. I think you've answered that, but it definitely makes it beautiful. And I think it's the kind of love that I don't think we can find anywhere in this world, because it's not of this world. It exists outside of it. And if that's true, then that's a love that's worth looking into.
Yeah, totally. Thanks, Gareth. So there's 2 questions left in the chat. We might not take any more questions because we don't want you all to have to be here all evening. Yeah, if we just answer these couple more, and we'll try to round up at like 1:45, 10:45, or something like that, so that you're not having to hang on here indefinitely. But we're enjoying answering these questions, so we will answer them and honor the fact that they have been put into the chat and they deserve an answer. Gareth, do you want to maybe go with this question about, if God cares so much about love, then why is there so much hatred in his creation? And then I might give a stab at the last question we have there, and then we might wrap up.
Sure. I mean, this is a massive question as well. I'll try and be as quick as I can with it. But I think in answering this question, one of the things that I would say is that love is only meaningful if it's freely given. I don't think you can have like true love if you don't have true freedom. For example, a lot of people would say, like, well, why couldn't God just create a world in which there's no possibility for things to mess up or no possibility for suffering? And I get that ambition, I get that question, but I think we need to ask a question beyond that. And that question is this: what kind of world would we expect that world to be? One of my favorite books, I was telling some of the guys in my group earlier on, one of my favorite books is Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. And Sky One have just done a new sort of mini series on it. But Brave New World is this like futuristic world in which people aren't like all of the ambitions of science and all of the ambitions of like pleasure and things like that have all been achieved. It's a world pretty much without suffering. But most people would look at it, and I think Sky One actually branded the new series on this question. It's like, what is greater, happiness or freedom? Because as much as the Brave New World is a world that's designed for happiness and designed for purely like giving people pleasure, whatever way they can find, the reason why it's a dystopic world is because it's a world where people are not free whatsoever. Everything's determined. And so people have pleasure, people have a lot of sexual pleasure, but they don't have love. And Margaret Atwood, famous feminist who wrote The Handmaid's Tale and stuff like that. In The Handmaid's Tale, there's a great line where the main character says this: nobody dies from lack of sex, but people die from lack of love. And I think that's a really, really interesting line. And I think the reason, as I said, with answering the other question, the reason why my wife's love for me is meaningful is because I know that she's free enough to not offer it to me. If my wife was purely a robot who was programmed to love me and to do whatever I want and all the rest of it, like that might be great, but I could never say that she truly loved me, even though maybe, you know, the words come out of her mouth, because I'd like wired the chemistry in her brain a particular way in order to determine that. The reason why that love doesn't exist is because it's predetermined. And I think one of the greatest dignities that God has given us as human beings is real freedom. And we use that freedom to offer true love. The reason why my wife's love is so meaningful is because I know she's not programmed to say it. She knows me, she understands me, she sees me at my weakest points, and she still chooses freely to offer me her love, even though she doesn't have to. And that's what makes it so special. And I think that's the gift that God has given to us. Now, of course, that means that we can use our freedom in different ways and often use our freedom for bad. And of course, that's the whole biblical story, Hannah, as you said, that's why things have messed up. But the question is, what world would you rather live in? And personally, I'd rather live in a world where love and the things that we pursue aren't a delusion. They're actually real and they're actually meaningful, even if by definition, that also means that we can use our freedom in order to make the world as a whole or other people's world a particular dark place. C.S. Lewis said, God thought that we were worth that kind of risk. He so wanted us to have freedom. He so wanted us to be capable of responding to each other with free love, but more importantly, responding to him freely and not in a programmed way, that he was prepared to take that risk. So I think, you know, maybe that answers a little bit of the question, how can these two things be reconciled? Because I think they can. The real question is, what has God done about a world in which things mess up and things break? Has God done anything about it, even though he's allowed us to live in that world? And I think Christianity says absolutely yes. But you'll need to come back and hear more about that as we talk about it later on in the events week.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Gareth. That's super helpful. So our last question that we have there, guys, says, you mentioned how Jesus does not leave us messy, but changes us. Does he actually change us? Or are you really saying that following his ideas will make us better people? So no to the latter part of that. I am not really saying that following his ideas makes us better people. That is a good question, though. Like, it's a similar thing to say, but a very different thing to say. What I am saying in that is that Jesus, like, actually changes us from the inside out. Like, he starts at a heart level and changes our desires and he just changes the messed up stuff within us. He doesn't like change us in a way in which Jesus makes us all clones. That is not the Christian message, thankfully. But the things that are not good, are not pleasing to God, and if we have a realistic view of ourselves, are not pleasing to ourselves as well. Thankfully, God in his kindness doesn't leave us where we are whenever we come to him, but he actually comes and And the Bible talks about the fact that if we come to Jesus, we have his Spirit. God gives us the Holy Spirit, and that God comes and lives inside of us, engages with us, brings us into this like totally new life in which we're united with God, and living along with him. And he does change us from the inside out. And I at least find that like super encouraging and helpful. I, as part of my job, like help people look into the Bible more and that sort of thing. And today I was preparing a Bible study that some people are going to do in their small groups with a few different Christian unions. And one of the bits of the Bible we're looking at is this part called Philippians, which is a letter from the Apostle Paul to a church in Philippi. And Paul is like giving them loads of sort of advice or encouraging them to live in certain ways, telling them to do stuff essentially. But in the midst of doing that, he says, like, work out your salvation, work out these things that I'm telling you to do, for it is God who works in you. So there's this like balance within Christianity of like, there's things for us to do, there's change for us to make in our lives. There are good actions to take and things to decide to do and not to do. But at the same time, God is working within us to change us, to make those things happen and make those things be a reality. It's not just like, cool, now you're a Christian, like, better get to work, you know, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and make yourself better. But no, it is so much better than that. And it's about living your life along with Jesus, like in your life, and him transforming us from the inside out. Yeah, so hopefully that answers that question. I think, Colleen, if it's okay with you, will you wrap up now? And